All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode, Making Moves in Multifamily Live with your host, Tim Vest and Tim Vitale. We're going to get right into it today. And I am super excited to talk about our plan. I think, last week we talked about year-end strategy and planning and all this other kind of stuff. But one of the major decisions that Tim and I had made at the end, this was a couple months ago now, but for the end of this year and into the beginning of next year, is that we're strategically taking some steps backwards so that we can take some strides forward. And a lot of that actually came from one of our mentors, Tim Bratz. We met with him back in July or August, and we kind of did an analysis on the portfolio and made some decisions in July about what we were going to do. So, with that, let's get right into it, Tim. Tim, how do you feel about how does it make you feel that we're going to be taking a couple steps back?
Uh, okay. After talking to Brats, I'm a little bit kind of like foot on the gas kind of guy, so it does feel a little strange to me. Like I'll be completely honest with you guys. Like we wrapped up. I think I'm wrong. I think I'm right here, Tim. I think we wrapped up our last acquisition last week,
For this
and
year? Yep.
for this year, and it feels a little weird for me right now. Here we are Tuesday. I think that closed out Friday, and I'm sitting here kind of going, what am I doing? What do I do?
I can give you some things to do.
Because I'm because I'm not off chasing acquisitions right now,
Right.
which I feel
Um,
like which I feel like has been my life for the last damn
3
10
years,
months now.
4
Yeah,
years.
3 years, and especially the last 10 months. Yeah,
Yeah, especially. Yeah, I would say it makes me feel relieved because there's a lot of things that are just Tim and Tim putting our heads down, running through the wall, and getting it done.
yeah,
And we know, I mean, we read all the books. Hey, good morning, Dennis. Good to see you. We know we've read all the books. We know that putting your head down and working 16-hour days is not the answer. It's not how you build a successful business. It's not how you it, what was I going to say? It's not how you inspire your employees to take ownership of their roles and responsibilities. It's not how you build something that grows on its own. So
right.
we've decided to kind of take a couple steps back and reassess our entire org chart per se. We're looking at our org chart. We're looking at roles, responsibilities, job titles. We're looking at we're doing time audits of all of our employees to have an understanding of where they are. I mean, Tim and I had a realization the past week, really. It was like, we don't know what our employees do all day. And I say that very broadly. We know what they're
Yeah,
doing, but we don't know like where they're spending their time. And the reason I'm saying that is because we had a conversation with our VP and we found out just by sheer dumb luck of me asking a random question that she was spending more than 50% of her time on a daily basis doing compliance for our
yeah,
light tech compliance. And we're like, wait a second, that's not a 50 to $100 an hour task. That's a $10 an hour task. So we, over the course of 2 weeks, we kind of dove into what that looks like. What are the responsibilities? How much time does it take? Talk, help us understand what your role looks like. And Tim and Tim's job is to sit there and figure out how do we make our employees' lives easier, better, more efficient.
yeah.
And we explored like some technical solutions. We looked at some online stuff. We looked at software. We looked at a bunch of different things to try to help us solve the problem. What it turned out being was we and I reached out to a friend of mine. Shout out to Evan if you're watching this. Evan Votilla. Some of you guys probably follow him on social media, but I was talking to him because he does a lot of virtual assistants and a lot of artificial intelligence (AI). Turns out, just by sheer luck, I bring it up and we're talking about it. And he goes, "You know what? I have the perfect VA for you." I was like, "You do?" So I had to take the culture index survey. Perfect match, basically. And I sent it to our consultant and said, "Carrie, what do you think about this?" He asked me a couple questions. I answered them. He goes, "This seems like a no-brainer." I was like, "My goodness, this
Yeah.
is beyond eat. Why didn't we think of this earlier?" And then all of those decisions happened like within a day or two. And we hired this person. They actually started this morning. So they're starting like the online training. We're sending her off to a class where she's going to become LITEX certified. She's getting her TCS, which is tax credit specialist certification. So she'll be able to do compliance for our entire company. And we're like, wow, we just found somebody to do this role so that our VP can focus on VP tasks and not on compliance tasks. And this
Yeah.
is just one iteration of how spending time in your business allows you to work on your business. And I understand, I know people say this all the time, work on the business, not in the business, on the business, not in the business. But at a certain point in time, when you are so high level, like Tim and I are, and we're focused on the two revenue generating activities, which are deals and investors, right? That's what drives our
Sorry.
real estate business
I was
forward.
enamored by the balloons, Tim. I'm
I know,
sorry.
me
I
too.
was.
I don't know why happened that.
How does it do?
Deals and
Does mine do
investors,
that?
right? You focus on those two things, and that's what grows our business. So Tim and I can get stuck in that world. And then we just kind of throw things into our management company and say, here, handle this. Here, handle this. It's just another property. What's the big deal? But the more time that we spend with our employees, Tim, I want you to tell your story about working in the office instead of just working from your home office. The more
Yeah.
time we spend with our employees and we're around them, we're realizing where they're spending their time, where they're spending their day, what things they're struggling with, and we're doing these time audits and things like that. And that is enabling us to focus on where we need to work on our business so that we can be efficient, we can solve the biggest needs first. And we've already solved a bunch of them, especially with this new hire that we just made yesterday.
Yeah, and you know what was really cool about this new hire is it was an opportunity. Tim and I have been a little frustrated with like the velocity of hiring within the company. So what was really cool is I think Friday, it was Thursday or Friday last week, we identified, hey, this need for our VP, right? And
Hmm.
then I had a Tim does, finds this person, does the culture survey, like I said, had given me a couple of updates, and then he sends me a video yesterday morning. He's like, "Hey, check out our English," and I'm like, "Wow, I wish I spoke that well." And I just sit up at that. I was like, "Hire her." I'm like, "Now, let's go." And he's like, "It's already done." And
Yeah, already
uh,
done.
but what was cool is after that, I had a call with our VP, and she's like, "We have to hire a compliance person." I was like, "Hey, done. It's already
Already
happened."
done.
Offer
Yeah,
offer went out this morning, and it was like this light went off, and she was like, "Oh, cool." And I'm like, "Hey, we need to hire. We're not sitting back on hiring." And this was an example. It was like leading by example, right? Like literally, we had found somebody, did check, dotted the i's, crossed the t's, and it's like, okay, make the offer and let's go. And she's starting today, and credit to Vitali here for leveraging his network, and network came through and had somebody ready for us to go. um but that's kind of like something that we have been seeing within the company as well, is like, like I think we talked about, going down to Mississippi, and we've had like 4 job openings for the longest time, and it's just been dragging on. And so you go in the office, you sit down with the regional there, and it's like, let's go through some resumes and go through the resumes, look at the culture index survey. Had a couple of interviews, walk in the office that day as well, which I sat in on. And by the time the afternoon was over, we'd identified 3 of the 4 offers we were going to make. All 3 accepted. They're all onboarded now. And then that 4th job got filled, what, last week? Think
actually, she put in her notice. So we gave her the offer 2 weeks ago. She actually starts tomorrow.
tomorrow. Yep.
Yeah,
So
she starts
so
tomorrow. So that was two
so
weeks ago
as
that we finished
yeah,
all
so
that.
as of tomorrow, all 4 positions are filled.
Mhm.
And we've been sitting around months waiting for these things to get done. So, there's a little bit of like, with Tim and me, of like, hey, sometimes we need to step in and just lead by example and show them, hey, this is how we get stuff done, right?
Right.
Um, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. I think it's a big message coming from us is, us taking a step back strategically to help focus on
yeah,
these operations, to help focus on the systems, to help focus on the hiring, to help focus on all these different things. It shows that we would never ask anybody else to do something that we were not willing to do. Right? Um, and that's true. I would never ask. I mean, one of the things that I ask our employees all the time is like, "Hey, I understand. I know you have a family, and once a month, maybe once a quarter, I always bring up, hey, how you feeling about being on the road so much, or how you feeling about doing all this travel?" And there's growing pains and there's difficulties and things like that obviously are unpleasant as you're going through. And it gives me the opportunity to remind everybody on the team, hey, number one priority, what has it been for the last 2 months? It's been hiring people. I have been hands-on. We've had our consultant hands-on. We've had VP Crystal hands-on. We've had our regional managers hands-on. I mean, we hired a ton of people. Over the last 60 days, we've hired 8 people.
Yeah.
I don't even know how many people we have in our company now, but we have enough. Well, we're still looking for 2 more, 3 more. Sorry, 4 more. I have 4 job postings up still that we have to hire for. And it's never going to stop, right? But I think that what we've done is we've helped narrow down the process and the understanding of how it should work and led by example of how we make decisions and why. And that's really kind of enabled the people in power in power positions, right? Like Crystal and our regionals to understand how we think and why we think so that they can make decisions too. I can't stress enough how much benefit we've gotten from not focusing on deals and acquisitions and investors. I mean, growing the investor list. Let me say it that way. Focusing on growing the investor list. You've seen Tim and I do less social media. We do this once a week because we love it, but I haven't really made a whole lot of posts. I made one post like 2 weeks ago, and everyone's like, "Holy crap! You guys closed 21 deals this year." I'm like, yeah, sorry, we're busy here working instead of talking about it online, which is, pros and cons, right? Because we weren't growing the investor base as much, and we probably could have used that opportunity a bit more. But working in the business has really kind of opened up our eyes to the inefficiencies of our business. One of the things that I have been working on over the last month were property management 101, right?
Yeah.
It was where are we dropping the ball and what are the lead levers that we need to pull in order to get the results that we're looking for? And we narrowed it down to there's 10 different things on a monthly basis. And I have it in ClickUp, which is like an Asana or Monday.com. There's 10 monthly things that need to happen. And if these happen on time, we can guarantee that our revenues and our profits will go up if we do these things. And let me tell you, at first, everyone was so against it. They were like, oh, I don't want to have to go in and do this. You're creating more work for me to go in and do this and blah, 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 blah. And of course, I come back with a couple how and why questions and what questions and let them solve my problem. But what's funny is last week I'm not gonna lie, I had this shit happy grin on my face because I got the response from one of our regional managers that, hey, what you implemented, I'm actually really starting to like this. This is really helpful. It helps me remember these things without having to remember these things. And I was like, yes, like this is exactly the point of why we do these things. And I know you guys were kicking and screaming the whole way, but I promise you, I've never led you wrong before. I would never ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. And I guarantee that if you use this process and this system, it will make your life easier and make you more efficient. Also, the caveat to that is we did tie people's quarterly bonuses to making sure that this was done. So there's kind of a double, they have an interest in doing it because they want to get their bonus. And I have an interest in them doing it because I want to pay their bonus. And I also want to grow our business and secure
How
and
do,
make sure that we provide job stability.
how do we do that for Google Docs?
Yeah.
No, little
Yeah.
inside joke, folks. Um, but yeah, no, this is absolutely needed. I think Tim mentioned that we had kind of identified this like middle of the year of,
Hmm.
hey, we've been in this acquisition heavy mode, and we could absolutely keep going for sure. However, you start to notice like one of the telltale signs for us is like we start to notice like, hey, the performance indicators that we typically track, they're starting to lag, they're starting to drop a bit. And then two, we get into this mode, and Tim and I, we said it this morning on a phone call, is like we seem to be just continuing to throw people at all the problems. And
Right.
the problem with throwing people, even if it's a $6 an hour VA, the problem
Hmm.
with throwing people at the problems is you're actually creating more management work for yourself. And then two, at some point, I don't care what they cost, the revenue for your company is the revenue for your company. And now you've thrown so many people at it that your company is no longer profitable. Um,
Yep.
and 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 then quite frankly, it's a major management headache. So, as Tim and I started going over some things in the last month or so, and like meeting with our VP, meeting with the staff, getting more ingrained in their day to day, and which we're going to dive into even more. We started to notice like, hey, you're spending a lot of time on this task, like the compliance piece. But that's just one of like four examples we've identified over the last month, where it's like, hey guys, we have some ideas. Tim and Tim have some ideas that could make this easier for you. And it doesn't involve hiring somebody. In some cases, it does, but there's some things we could do here to make this easier for you. Or, by the way, our regionals or our VP were taking on too many tasks, right?
Hmm.
That should have been handled at the property level. And
Yeah.
so it's also a reallocation of work, right? It's like, hey,
Hmm.
this shouldn't exist here. It should exist downstream. And Tim, I think one of the first places you kind of had a notice of that was like with your accounting team.
Yeah.
Um, the accounting team reached out and they're like, "Hey, too much is going on. Too much is going on." And kind of one of the moments for me is I was like, "I don't get it. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me." So Tim went and had a conversation with his accounting team, and sure enough, they're like, "Hey, this person's doing this person's doing this," and it was putting all of this work on the accounting team when the person who should have been doing the initial work is like the property manager, right?
Hmm.
Like the property manager should have been getting this 80% done, 90% done, and then passing it up to the accountants,
Yep.
which would have lightened their load quite a bit. So, like those are the types of things we're starting to notice is like, hey, we've grown so quickly that people are just jumping in and taking tasks. They're just, credit to the team. A lot of folks are just getting things done, right? It's like, hey, it needs to be done. I'm going to get it done. But we've kind of become inefficient in the along the way.
Yeah, it had gotten to the point where one of our lead accountants was gonna quit. She was like, "I
Yeah,
just can't do this anymore." And
yeah,
we're like, "Why? We don't understand." Like, the nothing has severely increased. But as I started, I had like a 2-hour phone call with her. We started going through some of the process inefficiencies, and something in my mind that would take all of an hour was taking her 8 to 10 hours to 12 hours to do. And I was like, wait a second, why is this taking you so much time? And
right.
that is what kind of, shown a spotlight on, okay, Tim, you need to sit here. You need to go through this process. You have to have an understanding of what is going right, what's going wrong. Why did this break along the way? And how can I fix it? There was three things. The first one was payroll. There was like, why is the payroll journal entry taking you a full business day? It should be a CSV file from the payroll system, and you upload the journal entry and make the transfers to reimburse the company for the payroll paid. It's like all of this is done with Paylocity. Well, turns out Paylocity was not set up correctly. So we spent significant amount of time, maybe 2-3 hours on one day to go through. We looked at all that payroll allocations. We looked at the journal entry. I looked at everything, found out what was done incorrectly, fixed it all. And now what took somebody 10 to 12 hours was done in maybe an hour or less. And I was like, okay, cool. The process is working again. Now let's identify what broke and how do we prevent it from happening again, which ultimately came down to training. So implemented those changes, and now everything's good again. So now that was last month. Now this month it's like, okay, one of the things that we are, I don't want to say struggling with as a company, but that's a very big task to handle on a monthly basis, is our American Express business credit card, where each one of our employees has a credit card and they have to identify what the expenses are and the receipts and this, that, and the other thing. I was literally working on this before we got onto this phone call because there's got to be 400 rows of information where people are, things need to be expensed to different GL accounts and descriptions and credit card naming function and all this kind of stuff. We literally have a phone call on November 13th, when the next, which is a Wednesday, not a Friday, when the next credit card statement comes out. And we said, okay, well, everybody should have all of their stuff done and we should have all the receipts. And now I'm going to sit with you and I'm going to go through this process start to finish so that I can understand how you're currently doing it, how I envision you should be doing it, and bridging the gap between and trying to fix this process to make it better. There were some things that we had to change along the way. That's why we didn't just do it in like 1 week and then the next week. Had to completely restructure our GL chart of accounts because that was turning into be like one of the sources of why things were taking so long. But again, like all of these things that we otherwise wouldn't have known is because we're able to spend time and say no to acquisitions. No, I'm not looking at your deal. No, I'm not like interested in making like doing a podcast for the next 2 hours so that I can get on social media, whatever. It's like I'm going to spend all this time and I'm going to time block and I'm going to put it in my calendar that this is what I'm doing. This is a process inefficiency that our company has identified that's causing a problem, and it's causing inaccuracies and it's causing frustration and it's causing stress. So that's where my job as a leader needs to be spent, is to fix this to ensure that my employees have what they need to be successful. Right. And if we continued the acquisition model, which we will do eventually again, I wouldn't have the time to focus on this. And the other side, somebody, you can argue with me here, should say, oh, well, you need a who for that how, right? Because my value is not spent in the business fixing these things. And I don't disagree, but I also enjoy being part of the business, and I also enjoy having a hands-on in the business to provide value and fix things and make them more efficient. I mean, even my W-2 role, I mean, essentially I got to the point where I could just download an Excel file and hit refresh, and all my pivot tables and everything, bam, right? Like I was able to do, something that would take days in a couple of hours, and that I took enjoyment in that. So that's where we're at right now. We're taking strategic steps backwards so that we can fix these inefficiencies. And I want to get to the point where people are saying, kind of bored because I don't really have enough to do. And that's when
Yeah,
Tim and I can turn the acquisitions back on and say, drink from fire hose again.
yeah, for sure. And we actually, we actually had one of our employees. And credit to her, she works at Teloff, guys. She's amazing. But she actually said, "Hey, don't take this away from me because I'm going to get bored, and I don't want to be bored."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Hey, listen, when you get bored, we'll find something else. We'll expand your role." But
Yeah.
because what she was doing today, and she's still doing it right now, guys, because we haven't completely solved this, is she's just working too much, right? And she just, I love her to death, but she's working too hard. She's leaving home at 7 a.m. and getting back at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
And I don't want that for any of my employees.
Mm-mm.
So yeah, that's to Tim's point. That's where we're trying to get, which is, hey, listen, if you get to a point where you're bored, great, that's great, because now we can talk about expanding the company, right?
Yes.
Now the company has capacity, and we can
Capacity.
go out
Oh,
and
that's a good word. Yeah. Capacity.
yeah, now we can figure out how to go out and utilize that capacity, right?
Yeah, because we have the team in place, we have the people, we're working on the systems to create capacity. That's a
Yeah,
really good way to kinda describe where we're at right now.
yeah, and I guess there's like more than you know. I've never understood this phrase, but I guess there's more than one way to skin the cat, right?
Mm.
But this is
I
how
don't
we're
know
going
anybody that
after
skins cats, but
it. Maybe I'll look that up. Hey,
yeah.
if somebody out there wants to look that up and put it in the chat, great. Um, but yeah, I mean, this is the way we're going after it. It's like Vitali said, it's how he managed things in his corporate life, and I got to be honest, I managed teams in my corporate career as well, and for the most part, I knew how to do most of the guys on my team. I knew how to do their job.
Mhm.
So it helped me manage them do their job. And that's kind of one of the things that Tim mentioned earlier on in the call is, hey, we had a moment where we're like, I'm not sure I understand what you do all day. And that also goes back to I don't know that I understand what it takes to do your job.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
good way to say it. I don't understand what it takes to do your job, like time commitments and systems and, how long does it take you to review one of these files? Is it 10 minutes
right,
or 2 hours? Because
right.
if it's 2 hours, you can only do 4 a day and we got 1,400 residents, we got a problem.
Yeah. And I don't know that you necessarily need to know how to actually replace that person yourself, because I don't think that's what we're talking about. Like I never want to step in. I never want to have to step in and be the property manager, right? But
Mhm.
I think I need to know enough about a property manager's job that when they say something that doesn't make sense, or they say something that's like, I'm going to challenge you on that, um, that we're able to do that. Because you need to understand enough about your company to challenge your guys, right? Um, it's keep them honest, make sure that you're helping them as much as you can, and then when you do see that they are working too hard, that you are able to acknowledge that, right? Like, hey, I think you're working too hard, and I don't know everything about your job, but I know enough about it to know that it shouldn't take this much time. So, what are we doing
Right.
here?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good way to say it. So,
So
yeah, I would say this is a new season for us. I mean, we've owned our management company now for since we started it in May. We took over properties starting July 1st. So it's been a little over a year. We found a lot of inefficiencies. We've hit some bumps in the road. We're kind of learning how to iron out some things. Um, we could have done it a million different ways, but this is how we did it, and here we are today. And I take no shame in that. But I do know that is the most I've ever worked is buying real estate and raising money is not that difficult anymore. It's really operating the deals and building the company culture so that people make decisions the way I or Tim Vest would make decisions without needing our input. That is the real challenge in building your business, because real estate's our widget on how we make money. It could, other people do HVAC companies or electrical or textiles or manufacturing or whatever, right? Our widget is real estate. Building the systems and processes behind the business and inspiring the people and the company culture and all of those things, that is real. The real work has come in.
yeah, yeah. Boy, textiles. Some people do that, huh? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
actually
Some
worked in
people,
textiles.
yeah. So
All right,
good. So
guys.
Tim, how do you feel about, with us taking these steps backwards and you know, when do you what are some problems that you foresee coming up in the future that we may or may not need to fix in order to turn the faucet back on? Because I know you're chomping at the bit to start making offers again.
So what are some issues that I see that we're going to have to fix, right? Um, for us, it's going to be, because I think one of the biggest things for us is going to be figuring out, does this kind of spoke model really work? And guys, what I'm talking about there is, we don't always buy 100 units in one location. What we do is we buy like 100 units in three locations within, you know, what we think is a
An
reasonable
hour.
distance, right?
Yeah.
What we think
45
is a
minutes to an
reasonable
hour.
distance, with the idea being that if we hire somebody in the spoke or inside the spoke, that they can manage 100 units, right? 30, 45 minutes away. Um, so, hey, that may be a challenge that we realize, hey, this is a concept that on paper looked like it would work, but maybe it doesn't. So we got
Hmm.
to pivot. We got to figure that out. And unless we figure that out, we won't have capacity to go add more. So we would probably have to kind of hold where we are for a little while until we get these stabilized and operating. And by the way,
Or be
that's
strategic with some acquisitions in order to help relieve the pressure there.
right. And that's, I just mentioned something that, by the way, I forgot about this. That was one of the things that one of our team members mentioned to us was, hey, when they're up and stabilized, they're fine. It's the
Hmm.
onboarding. It's the onboarding and it's getting them to stabilization that creates all the work. And maybe that's part of the pivot is like, hey, we know we can go buy three properties, but then we have to stabilize them before we have the capacity to go add some more, right? Because what we did, guys, is we went out and we bought like 20, right?
Yeah.
and and we're trying to roll out this new model, right? That not all property managers do, while we are onboarding 20 properties and going through renovations, going through lease up, going through, rent
Hiring.
roll turns, hiring, you name it. And we're
Yeah.
trying to do this. We're trying to do this as we are scaling at the entire time. So maybe it's a recognition of, hey, we made it through that. Probably not the most ideal way to do it. So we'll go by three at a time, two at a time, whatever that number is. Get those renovated, stabilized, and then we'll go do it again. Right.
Yeah.
So
Right.
um, I think it's going to be, for me, it's going to be proving that that model does work, and then exactly how the model works.
Yep. I think it was also necessary for us to a certain extent because we really needed to add the property units to support the infrastructure to do the business and do it well.
Right.
So it was kind of a double-edged sword of we were trying something new because of the access to deals that we had, and we also needed to grow in order to have the income and payroll and the necessary business functions to do it. So it was like, okay, well, we know this is going to suck for like 6 months, but we'll get through it. And then when we get to the stabilization piece, we can take a step back and look at, hey, how is this actually functioning? So maybe we ripped off the band-aid a little too fast, arguably. But nobody's given up. the people in our executive team they love the challenge. It has been difficult, and trust me, it's been voiced that it's been difficult because after like 6 to 8 months of that, you're like, okay, I've had enough now, right? Um, and and that's kind of when we're like, okay, this is the breaking point. Let's stop. Let's
Yeah,
analyze. Let's fix what's broken, and then we can get ready for the next run up.
yeah, and guys, like one thing, I know it's tech world versus real estate, but one of the things I'll tell you, like I've worked in tech startups, and I've never known a single tech startup that was not long hours, hard work, putting your head down, just getting done whatever needs to get done. Like almost any startup I've ever seen or been a part of, or people I know that have done a startup, they go through this exact same thing, right? It's like, hey, there's a period of time where it's, excuse the phrase, balls to the wall, everybody working their ass off.
Yep.
And it takes a lot of work. You're going to stumble. It's going to be painful, but then you get through it. You figure it out. You get through it. And we all look back on it and we go, man, remember how tough that was?
Yeah, looking back at it in hindsight, it's always like, man, that was the best thing that we ever did because it really kind of shown us in magnitude where our issues were, right? And we fixed those big issues very quickly, which enabled us to do what we do or what we will do in the future, right? So like I said, everything's a double-edged sword, and slow growth is slow and painful. Fast growth is fast and painful. So pick your poison. Which one do you prefer?
I like fast and painful.
Yeah.
Let's go.
That's it. So,
Uh,
all right, guys and girls, thanks so much for joining today. Appreciate it. Hope you guys learned something. As always, Chris, thanks for the shout out on the transparency. That's what Tim and I strive to do on this is just talk about our experiences, what we're going through, what we learned, how we screwed up, how we hope you don't screw up, how we fix those things, and we just keep trucking forward. So
good, bad,
appreciate
or to our detriment.
yeah, good, bad, or to our detriment. Being honest and truthful has never harmed us. All right. It actually has always come back and paid us for the benefit. Maybe not immediately, but definitely later on down the line.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I agree.
appreciate y'all. See you next Tuesday. Peace.
All right. See you guys.